The morning sun cut through the curtains, striking Lina directly in the eyes. She bolted upright, heart hammering against her ribs. The red digits on the clock burned. 9:30 a.m. She scrambled out of bed, feet hitting the cold hardwood floor with a sharp thud. She sprinted down the stairs, bracing for the usual morning clatter of breakfast preparations. She reached the bottom step and stopped. The house was unnaturally still. No whistling kettle, no footsteps, no voices. She moved through the kitchen, then the living room, then the hallway. Every room was empty. The air felt heavy and stagnant, lacking the usual rhythm of the morning. She walked back to the dining table. A single piece of paper lay in the center, stark against the wood. Lina grabbed it. Her eyes scanned the handwriting. Her parents had left for an emergency meeting. She read the words aloud, the sound of her own voice startlingly loud. She lowered the paper, and a slow, mischievous grin spread across her face. The house was hers. The silence was an invitation. A heavy floorboard creaked in the hallway. Alex burst into the dining room, hair standing in wild tufts, his eyes darting toward the kitchen. He stopped, scanning the empty corners of the house, his breath coming in short, ragged bursts. Lina did not move. She held the note up, letting the paper flutter in the air between them. Alex stared at the handwriting, his shoulders dropping as the tension drained. He let out a loud, sharp cheer that echoed off the high ceilings, throwing both hands toward the rafters. The lack of supervision hung in the air, thick and intoxicating. They looked at each other, the silence no longer a void, but a playground. Alex lunged for the kitchen, his boots skidding on the polished floor. Lina followed, her pace quickening. They reached the pantry door and yanked it open. Boxes of cookies tumbled onto the counter. Bags of chips were torn open. They grabbed everything within reach, piling snacks onto the table like spoils of war. The rules of the household had dissolved. They carried their plunder into the living room, leaving a trail of crumbs across the pristine hardwood. Alex grabbed the heavy sofa cushions, dragging them into the center of the floor to build a jagged, makeshift fort. Lina followed, dumping bowls of popcorn that spilled across the rug like white gravel. They kicked the cushions into place, ignoring the sticky juice stains already blooming on the fabric. Alex lunged for the remote, jamming the volume button until the walls vibrated with the roar of the television. They jumped, screamed, and danced, their movements reckless and uncoordinated. Popcorn kernels crunched under their feet. They dove into their cushioned fortress, while plastic wrappers fluttered like confetti in the wake of their play. By the time they stopped, the living room had been transformed into a battlefield of scattered cushions and spreading stains. The adrenaline of the fort faded, replaced by a gnawing, hollow hunger in their stomachs. Lina looked at Alex, her eyes bright with a new, dangerous idea. They sprinted back toward the kitchen. The pantry was already a wreck, but the oven stood clean and untouched. They decided to bake. Alex dragged a chair to the counter, reaching for the bag of flour on the top shelf. He pulled too hard. The bag tipped, hitting the edge of the counter and bursting open. A white cloud erupted. Lina laughed, but the sound was thin. She grabbed a carton of eggs, trying to crack them. Her grip slipped. The carton hit the tiles, shells crunching and yolks spreading in a thick yellow pool. Alex tried to wipe the floor with a towel, but he only smeared the mess further. They were surrounded by wreckage. Lina reached for the heavy glass bowl, her fingers slick with the spilled milk and raw egg. She tried to steady it, but the surface was too slippery. The bowl wobbled, tilted, and slid from her grip. It hit the floor with a sharp, violent crack that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet house. Shards of glass sprayed across the tiles, skittering into the corners of the room. The sound echoed, bouncing off the cabinets and the ceiling, before dying away into an absolute, suffocating stillness. Lina and Alex froze, their hands still hovering in the air. The frantic energy that had driven them just moments ago evaporated, leaving behind a cold, sinking weight in their chests. They looked down at the wreckage. The kitchen was no longer a place of experiment. It was a ruin. The flour dust hung suspended in the stagnant air, settling slowly over the broken glass. Neither of them moved. The silence of the house which had felt like an invitation earlier, now felt like a judge. Every breath they took seemed too loud. They stood paralyzed, staring at the jagged remnants of the bowl, the reality of their recklessness finally sinking in. The fun was gone, only the mess remained. The front door creaked, a slow, deliberate sound that cut through the silence like a blade. Leo stepped into the hallway, his bag sliding from his shoulder to the floor with a dull thud. He walked toward the kitchen, his pace steady and unhurried. He stopped at the threshold. His gaze moved slowly across the room, taking in the flour-dusted counters, the sticky pools of milk, and the jagged glass scattered across the tiles. He did not speak. He did not raise his voice. He simply stood there, his presence filling the space, making the kitchen feel smaller. Lina and Alex stared at the floor, their faces burning. As the weight of his observation pressed down on them, they could not look up. They could not explain. The wreckage spoke for itself. Leo moved into the center of the room, stepping carefully over the debris. He reached into the corner, gripped the handle of a broom, and held it out toward them. Lina reached out, her fingers trembling as she took the handle. Alex moved to pick up the dustpan. Lina pushed the broom across the tiles, the bristles catching on the sticky residue of spilled milk. Each stroke felt heavier than the last. Beside her, Alex knelt on the hard floor, his fingers working to scrape the dried flour from the grout. The air in the kitchen was thick with the scent of dust and cleaning agents. They worked in a rhythm born of necessity, not joy. Lina's lower back throbbed with a dull, persistent ache that forced her to straighten up every few minutes. She wiped sweat from her forehead, leaving a faint streak of white powder across her skin. Alex's hands were raw, the skin reddened. He gathered the shattered glass into a pile, his movements slow and deliberate to avoid the sharp edges. They scrubbed the counters until their shoulders burned, removing the stubborn stains they had created in their haste. The kitchen was slowly yielding, but the exhaustion was settling deep into their bones, a physical toll for a morning of thoughtless freedom. Lina dipped the cloth into the bucket, wringing it out until the water ran clear. She wiped the countertop in long, steady arcs, watching the last of the flour streaks vanish under the damp fabric. The surface began to shine, catching the afternoon light that streamed through the window. Alex stood by the sink, drying the final glass bowl with a towel. He placed it back on the shelf, the clink of ceramic against wood sounding sharp. They moved to the living room, clearing away the last of the plastic wrappers and popcorn kernels that had been ground into the rug. Lina straightened the sofa cushions, tucking them back into their original positions. The floor, once a battlefield, now showed the clean grain of the hardwood. The air felt lighter, the heavy scent of spilled milk and dust replaced by the faint, sharp smell of soap. They stood in the center of the room, scanning the space. The counters were clear. The floor was spotless. The furniture sat in its proper place. The chaos that had defined their day was gone. Lina looked at Alex, then at the pristine room. The tension finally ebbed away, leaving behind a profound, weary stillness. The house was whole again. The front door lock clicked, a sound that cut through the silence like a blade. Lina and Alex stood frozen in the hallway, their hands still damp from the final wipe of the counter. The door swung open, and their parents stepped inside, bags in hand, eyes scanning the entryway. They moved into the living room, their gaze sweeping over the polished floor and the perfectly aligned furniture. Not a single wrapper remained. Not a speck of dust marred the surfaces. The parents stopped, looking from the spotless room to the two children standing by the kitchen threshold. A smile broke across their mother's face. She walked to the center of the room, running a hand along the back of the sofa, finding it clean and undisturbed. She turned to them, her voice warm and steady. She praised their diligence, noting how well they had maintained the house while she and her father were away. She thanked them for their responsibility. Lina and Alex stood still, their shoulders slumped with fatigue, their palms raw from the hours of scrubbing. They did not speak, but they exchanged a long, tired look. The praise felt heavy, a stark contrast to the chaos they had hidden beneath the surface. They nodded to their parents, A silent pact formed between them as the house remained perfectly still.